You touched on Jack Kennedy briefly. You would have met him in 1947 when he was in Congress.
That's correct.
What were your first impressions of the future president?
Well, first impressions are, I liked him. I liked him as one fellow meeting another. You know, it's just you react. And my reaction was that he was an interesting fellow. He had a nice, pleasant way about him. He was socially most enjoyable as time went on. And I was down there with Foster Bergelow. Jack Kennedy's congressional office was in the same building. So we did become somewhat acquainted, but not to any intimate degree.
Yes.
But he was a fellow that intrigued me. But I left Washington after 2 years with Foster and came back to Springfield, and I just felt I had an experience. It was interesting and all the rest, but I had the responsibility to go on and earn a living.
Sure.
And so I kind of turned my back on the political arena, but Jack Kennedy contacted me, and he came to Springfield, and we had dinner, and we became better acquainted, and months went by, and we saw each other quite often, and it led to Jack asking me to be the director of his campaign organization in the state in the Cabot Lodge contest, and that turned out to be a successful venture. And then he asked me to go to Washington to join his staff, which I declined with appreciation. But I did maintain an organized effort to continue contact with all these wonderful people in Massachusetts that had supported him. So for the 6 years intervening until he came up for re-election, we saw a good deal of each other. We were in communication on a very regular, almost constant basis. And when the re-election came up, of course, our organization was all in place, and it was our desire. It was not truly a significant contest at all, but our desire was to, again, maximize the vote so it would be impressive in terms of re-election. And after that was over with, we had every intention of seeking the presidency.
Yes. How would you compare, Mr. O'Brien, the James Curley type of politician with the Kennedy type of politician?
Completely different. Jim Curley was, he was the, as I said, supreme orator. Was very colorful, but more the two-fisted, in the old style, which was the style at that time, political operative. Jack Kennedy was in background and education and in general perception in the state completely different. What happened was that these people, these ethnic groups, the Irish, the Italians, the Poles, and the rest, all of whom had immigrated, now were moving along, establishing themselves. Some of them of second and third generations had gotten to significant business levels and professional levels and academic levels and the rest. And interestingly enough, at that stage, many of them, they started to move into the suburbs of Boston and what have you, and they lost their political identity. They weren't as enthusiastic about being labeled Democrats.
Yes.
Somehow or other, for economic reasons and maybe social reasons, the rest, there was a drift away. And ultimately that resulted in Curley becoming quite discredited and no longer considered a leader among the people of my heritage.
Yes.
And at that point, coincidentally, Jack Kennedy, after World War II, returning as a war hero, seeking the congressional seat and winning it, became identified very quickly. His family, his war experiences, Harvard University, and the rest. And it brought a lot of these people back to interest in Jack Kennedy, if not interest totally in the party as a whole. And that was a great advantage to Jack Kennedy in defeating Henry Cabot Lodge of Massachusetts in the very election where our incumbent Democratic governor was defeated for re-election.
Yes.
And Eisenhower carried Massachusetts in that same election by about 250,000 votes. So it was quite an accomplishment, but to a considerable extent it was due to the return of ethnics to the fold, so to speak.
Yes.